Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Wednesday at about 10:35. It is the first day of spring. It's hard to believe that we are 2024 and we are into the first day of spring, coming out pretty much coming out of a non-existent winter. The winter that wasn't meant to be. We had maybe two or three major storms, pretty crazy. And it's weird. It was actually snowing just a few minutes ago, but pretty wacky weather. Pretty strange, but anyway, it is what it is. So I hope everyone's doing good. I want to welcome aboard some of the new subscribers we had here at Film Fanatic. Had quite a few new subscribers the last week or two, so it's been pretty awesome. I really appreciate people jumping on board. I really love when people are commenting on the videos. That's like, I don't know, pretty much like my bread and butter. That's my main thing that I love the most. And so it's it's all about the interaction. It's all about the coverage of you know the hopefully the coverage of movies that a lot of folks maybe have never seen. It's all about the movie or the movies at the end of the day. Especially when it's a movie that I really love or that just totally gets me excited. And those movies tend to be movies that are maybe not really talked about a lot. You don't hear lots of coverage or people chattering about these kinds of things. And that's what it's at. That's where it's at for me. Recently, the other day, actually last night, there were two YouTube guys that I was watching, and they did one was a was it was basically it's an interview, and one of the guys that I do follow quite a bit. He's one of the biggest YouTube guys around, and he covers mostly horror films. And I don't know. I have a very mixed thing around his channel and things. And on one hand, I think he's really smart, and I do like his selection. I do like his commentary on a lot of films. He mostly covers newer horror films. He does other styles, but he definitely is very contemporary. So I do watch his channel to kind of get some sense of some new things that come out. I do like to keep my finger on that pulse. Um, you know, Most of the time I am steeped. I'm way into the old school horror films. From the 70s and 80s, and the last 2 years I've been going back even further. Lots of great films I've been discovering in the early 70s and 60s, and then also late 50s. So that's my jam. And but with all that being said, I try to stay contemporary. But anyway, this guy who I won't mention, but this guy that I have actually corresponded a couple times, he's a very big YouTube guy. He's one of the biggest, as far as the YouTube universe. He's one of the biggest guys. He is able to make a living just talking about movies, which is pretty awesome. He's kind of got a dream job. You know, if I was able to do that someday, where I was able to get enough, you know, income from just the YouTube channel, where I'd have, a Patreon, and I got some of those things, I would definitely be into it. I'm, but that being said, I'm kind of not into being sponsored by big companies. I don't know. It's kind of how I am. I have this, I don't know. I just have this like punk rock aesthetic that's just kind of been in my DNA since I was a little kid. And I don't know. I just feel funny. Like if I got to a point of where, say, I had, 100,000 or whatever followers, and then suddenly I was getting sponsored by like different companies, like I don't know, some kind of dieting company or some kind of therapist company, and I'd have to like promote them while I do my show. I don't know. I'm just not totally not into that. At face value, I'm just like, no, I don't. I don't really want to do that. I'm not really. And I get it. I get that's the game, but it is what it is. That's kind of a side thing. But anyway, you know, he was being interviewed. This guy who's very big by another YouTube guy who I just came across, and they were talking about. It was a long interview, but they were talking about mostly at the tail end of the interview. They were talking about their top 5 slasher films of all time, and I thought it was cool. I thought some of the movies he picked out, particularly the first two, which was number 5 and number 4, which was Sleepaway Camp, which is a slasher classic. I mean, one of the best, one of the greatest slasher movies of all time. And then he went into the next pick, which was Black Christmas, which, again, I've done multiple shows on that movie. I think that movie, really, when it comes to the world of horror exploitation, and in particular the slasher genre, it's probably, pound for pound, the most important and poignant movie in the genre. Just because it really acted as a blueprint, a framework for really where that, it dictated to where that genre was going to go. And again, these are just, this is all a matter of opinion, and I'm glad we live in a world where not everybody has the same opinion. But I I have to be honest, I checked out after those two picks, and only because um and I've gotten in this thing with him before. Not that I'm not a confrontational person. I don't ever assume that people need to share my tastes, in film or my opinions, because I wouldn't want to live in a world like that. But I just have this thing sometimes with him and his channel of where he doesn't really, acknowledge anything before. Say, for instance, these two movies that he picked, which are classics. But there are so many, I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands of fantastic Italian horror films that came out right around that time, and for the most part before that timeline. And just that he seems to always dismiss and doesn't want to go and doesn't want to take that deep dive into like exploring the horror genre. And I just get perturbed at that, and I'm just like, I just feel he's got this very narrow view, and it doesn't mean that he has to like, every, say, Lucio Fulci movie out there, or Mario Bava film, but I just feel like he's missing out, and he doesn't acknowledge those films that came out before, you know, he's always talking about the Child's Play franchise, and he's always talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Very, very rarely does he go before. Does he focus on anything before? And it just, I don't know. It just aggravates me that he is a horror fan and he is a pretty smart guy, but he seems to just not acknowledge that any of these other directors and films were, just creating so many films in our favorite genre, and doesn't acknowledge any of those guys at all. And just because he doesn't really think it's, his cup of tea, but he doesn't have to like them, but he just doesn't, acknowledge that kind of the founding fathers of the genre. He doesn't acknowledge it. But anyway, so it just kind of aggravates me. But anyway, that being said, I got frustrated and I turned the channel off, and I was like, I can't get into this. But anyway, so this show today is on a new movie that I just got, and I watched it the other night, and I completely fell in love with this movie. I'd never seen it before. I went to Bull Moose last week, in Bangor, and I have been really into Bull Moose in Bangor lately. I have really been driven to go there more. Their selection for their films has just been pretty stellar. I don't know what it is. Each Bull Moose is very different in a lot of ways. Some have better movie selections. Some have better music selections. It's always each Bull Moose, even though obviously it's the same company, they each have their own kind of style or specialty kind of thing about it. But I've been finding lately Bull Moose in Bangor has been the best as far as their music and their movie selection. I've gotten some just incredible titles, and I one of the movies I bought was this movie that I never seen before, and this movie is just bonkers, crazy, and just amazing, and it's definitely a an just an incredible, low down and dirty, ridiculous slasher horror exploitation movie, and that is Bloodhook. This movie is fucking awesome. I've never seen it before. I got a really good deal on it. It was like $6 or $7. Still totally sealed up, unused. I watched this last night. It's got two discs, really amazing art. I mean, it's just amazing. It's got two discs. It's got the movie itself, the feature, and then it's got some pretty good interviews. Again, I had never seen this movie. It's a Troma release. Troma, of course, one of the biggest names, and their Troma is a legendary company in the world of exploitation. Of course, founded by the lunatic that is known, who is known as Lloyd Kaufman. Just an amazing guy. Troma's, they're probably they're most well known for the Toxic Avenger franchise, which is probably their most successful. They also produced the it was they also launched the careers and the creators of South Park. Cannibal the Musical was a Troma release, and that's what put those guys on the map. And that's an amazing movie. That's a movie I really want to cover. It's completely absurd and completely insane. So Troma's done some really, big things over the years where, you know, Toxic Avenger and also obviously uh, South Park. I mean, those are part of the American culture, part of the American fabric when it comes to films. It's hard to. It would be hard. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who has never heard of South Park, and also you'd be really hard pressed to find somebody who is like Toxic Avenger. What is that? And again, these guys, Lloyd Kaufman specializes, and his company and all the different directors that he worked with in these like totally shitty, sleazy, ultra low budget exploitation movies. But and so many, there are so many titles, and I love Troma's like one of the greatest companies ever. And but unfortunately, for some reason, I don't own a lot of Troma films on Blu-ray. I'm not sure why. I just haven't. I do have a few, and I love them to death. I've seen most of those films, and I'm looking forward to buying more and more because they're just the best. This movie, Bloodhook, came out in '86, and it was directed by Jim Mallon. There are some really great special features on here. There's a really great interview with Jim Allen. There is some really cool interviews with the cast of Bloodhook. And this movie is completely and utterly ridiculous. It's everything that you expect and kind of want from a Troma film, where everything is so ridiculous and kind of surreal and so incredibly over the top. It's everything that you want from a movie in general, as far as I'm concerned. The Blu-ray transfer for Bloodhook is just gorgeous. This is a gorgeous looking Blu-ray. It's the whole premise of this movie is totally bonkers and crazy. And basically, it's about this group of people, young people that go to this camp, like a beautiful summer camp on this beautiful lake, and it's like this fishing village. And there was, before you're kind of brought into this universe with these kids and these people, there were a series of these killings that happened, that were very mysterious. They were like unsolved crimes, and one by one, these kids get picked off, but the killer uses a fishing hook to kill them, and it's fucking hilarious. It's just totally ridiculous. It's super gory too. The movie gets more and more gory as you go, and it's got some amazing practical effects. And it's the cinematography is really beautiful. I love the juxtaposition because it's definitely a slasher movie, and it gets more and more strange and much more gory as you go. And yet the contrast of it being in this like really beautiful, idyllic kind of setting, I love that. I love that aspect of it. But this film is actually really, really well directed. Like, it's, super trashy. It's totally ridiculous, as only Troma could serve up. But it's actually the direction, the way this film was directed, the cast, the cinematography, are just pretty fantastic. Like, it's actually, high level. I think it's not just, you know kind of terrible. It's actually really good. It's actually, you know for a trauma film, it's it's a little bit more, kind of at a higher level, if you will, as far as the tech from the technical standpoint. The cast is fantastic. The setting, again, I think is really great. I love the juxtaposition. The kills are awesome, and the more and more you get into the story, and kind of the plot reveal of where you find out who the killer is kind of amazing and super entertaining, super fun. It's a longer movie too. A lot of the trauma films. That's one thing, with a lot of exploitation movies, is they usually clock in at about an hour and 20 minutes or so. A lot of these exploitation movies are on the shorter side of things, and I think a lot of that is attributed because of, the lack of finances. This movie's pretty long though. Bloodhook is almost 2 hours, and I think for trauma films in general, it's a longer running it has a longer running time, but amazing. You can't go wrong. And again, I took a chance. I bought this, got it for like $7, unopened, unused. It was totally sealed up before, and I was blown away by it. My first time viewing, never even heard of this film, and you gotta love it. You gotta love it. I saw also in the shop at Bull Moose, they have which I was tempted to get, but it was a little bit expensive. But it is something I eventually want to get. They had the complete Toxic Avenger series, and there's like a bunch of movies in that, and I guess there is a remake that's coming out that I've heard is actually pretty good, which is crazy. But this movie's fantastic, beautiful, a beautiful addition to my collection. I definitely need to get more trauma releases. I'm not sure why I don't have more. I've seen I've seen quite a few of them over the years, like in passing. I remember seeing a bunch of trauma films when I was a kid. I mean, they're the span of films that they have released is pretty incredible. I mean, 60s, 70s, 80s, and I believe they put out new releases now. There's a couple of trailers on here for some newer trauma films, and it's crazy. My one of my favorite trauma films, is Bloodsucking Freaks. That movie is just amazing. That movie is so fucked up and disturbing. That's a movie I really, really need to buy on Blu-ray. But there's so many classics. That of course the Toxic Avenger movies, but this is great. Fantastic, total. And I love that this movie. I didn't realize that this was a slasher movie, and so I was even happier because the slasher genre is that's my jam. That's my favorite style. So very cool, highly original, completely wacky, totally ridiculous, and amazing. So definitely check this out. 1988. It's one of the things I do when I check out a movie. I always check out what year a film comes out. I I typically don't buy newer film. I don't usually buy newer films when I'm Apple Moose. There are, of course, some good newer films that I do buy. I buy the newer ones at Goodwill or the more contemporary films, but I try to always seek out the old school stuff when I'm Apple Moose. And I definitely one of the things I do, especially when I come across a movie I haven't seen and that looks really cool, I check the year. And that's happened to me before where I'll like look at a movie and it looks really cool and totally up my alley and then I see it's like 2010 or 2013. But if I come across a movie that looks as exciting, on equally, and I see it says say 1972, 99% of the time I will pick out the old school one over the newer one. It's just how I am. So, but 88 is a good year. Kind of on the cusp, for exploitation. I mean, that's like the late 80s was kind of when it really started to subside as far as a genre where it was, where, that a genre that had just exploded and ignited, across the world. So that's one of the big factors. And, also if the movie has a good amount of special features, that's also a big determining factor for me, especially when it comes to movies that I haven't seen before. But, I have lucked out on so many occasions of going in blind and buying movies at a really good price that I've never seen. And, there's maybe one or two movies that I have bought that I'm not super excited about that I have never seen. But for the most part, they even have some really good qualities about them that I still kind of like them, and I'm glad I have them. But I'm not totally into them. There's some factors around them that I think that they were a little bit disappointing. But for the most part, I have struck gold. So yeah, definitely recommend this Troma release, Bloodhook. It's kind of the shit. If you like slasher movies, this is awesome from the great year of 1988. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.